guys, it's Sarah from Just My Typewriter, and I'm here today with a cup of decaf coffee and a lot of typewriters. I am a typewriter enthusiast. I got my first typewriter in 2018, and when I started, I had no idea what I was doing. I still don't. But one of the questions I get a lot on Instagram and on this YouTube channel are, what do I do? A typewriter can be intimidating. There's so many moving pieces. There's a lot of things that could go wrong. So when you're looking at getting maybe your first typewriter or maybe your first few typewriters, there are a couple checks that you can do to actually see if that typewriter is something that is worth purchasing. Now, if you want to figure out where to find typewriters, I highly suggest that you check out the video on collection curation I have on this channel. I've linked it down below, but I talk about where you can find them. I find most of my typewriters on Facebook Marketplace, so I can buy them locally. I can go pick them up and check them out in person, but you can also check out typewriters in person in local thrift stores, maybe your local Goodwill, yard sales, Craigslist. Those are all good places to check out your typewriter in person, which is what I highly suggest for your first few typewriters. If you're looking for more specialized typewriters, you can go on sites like eBay, Etsy, and also Shop Goodwill, where they have live auctions for typewriters. And then you can look for more specialized typewriters. The difference there is that you can't check them in person to see if they're working. When you find a typewriter in person, there's always a few things you can do, a little diagnostics check that you can do in the store before you fork over money for it to see if it's the right typewriter for you. One of the first things I do on every typewriter that I see, even if I don't purchase it, is I check out all of the keys on the typewriter and I hit every single one to make sure that it actually works. You go through, you hit every single key on your typewriter to see if it comes up and hits this rubber platen part on your typewriter. That's where the typing would happen on the paper, and you want to make sure that the key hits all the way to the platen. Now, if you have a key that doesn't come up all the way or doesn't move at all when you hit that key on the keyboard, that might mean that it is unlinked inside the typewriter. It is possible to fix that. That is a fixable thing, but it takes a lot of patience. If it's a task that you don't think you're up for, that might be a typewriter to pass on, especially if it's multiple keys that do that same thing. Now, you're going to know that because the other keys around it might come up and a singular one doesn't come up, or a few don't come up. If all of your keys aren't coming up at all, nothing's moving, there are a couple things that could be. It could be that the typewriter is actually locked. Some typewriters have locks on them, so when they're in their portable case, they won't move around in transit, so that this carriage part won't be moving around inside the case, buggering up the inside of your case, ruining your platen knobs, breaking something in the typewriter, and you can check for a locking mechanism on your typewriter. I have a Royal Aristocrat typewriter I recently purchased that has this locking mechanism underneath the carriage on the one side of the typewriter. Look for some kind of lever that might lock it. On this Olympia typewriter, there's also an external lock here on the front, so when it's pressed down, the keys will move all the way up to the platen. When it's pressed up, those keys won't even engage at all. They'll stop about halfway through. So you want to make sure that maybe a carriage lock is on. If you can see some kind of lever to disengage that carriage lock, then you can test your keys. It's also possible sometimes that in transit they set the margins, which are the sides of your paper, all the way to center to keep that carriage from moving around a ton. This happens on a lot of typewriters that don't have carriage locks. They'll set their margins right around the inch in the middle to keep this top part from moving left or right at all. The way to check and see if that's the reason for why your typewriter's not advancing is to actually hit the margin release levers on the typewriter and then try moving the carriage. The margin release lever is usually labeled as MR, especially on a lot of portables, and what that does is it moves those margins as you move the carriage out to the outer edges of the typewriter, and then you can try typing again and seeing if you get a different result. A lot of times that's what happens on typewriters, and that's such an easy fix to find the carriage lock or to fix the margins so that your typewriter will actually work. Another thing I'm always checking on typewriters, especially in stores, is the platen. The platen is this rubber part on the top of the typewriter. It grips the paper and rolls it through so you can type on them. They can get hard over time because they're made of rubber, especially if they've been uncovered or not taken care of for a long period of time. They're just kind of sitting out there. They can get hard. They can get chips in them. I have chips in the platen on my Underwood Universal typewriter, and those can really mess with the typing experience. If you see a huge crack all the way across your platen, platen on the typewriter, that means that that typewriter platen has dried out and you really won't be able to smoothly roll paper through it to type on it. Now you can get your platens redone, but it is expensive. There are ways to redo your platens at home, but it does require some more technical skill. If you're interested in figuring out how to do that, I have that in a video on the restoration of my Royal Victory model typewriter, which I've also linked below. But that is a higher level typewriter fix. So if you see a cracked platen and it's an expensive typewriter, it might be just more worth it to pass on that machine. Another thing I've run into recently on especially portable typewriters is the drawband. Now the drawband is this piece that goes from the drum spring in your typewriter. It has a string or a cord that runs all the way across your carriage, and it makes it possible for your carriage to move back and forth. Loud bell on that one. When you have a more portable machine, that drawband is more often than not a piece of string. And over time, those can get broken, especially if the tension has changed, if they've been dropped or moved around a lot in the portable case. Sometimes those snap, and that requires you to replace the drawband. Now, that can sound scary, and for me, it was a little scary the first time I did it. Check out the video on how I fixed Georgiana, my repair story time. That makes it sound a little intimidating. It is a fix that's possible. All you need is some fishing lines and patience and maybe an extra set of hands to rewrap a new string around the spring barrel in your typewriter and get it all the way out to the edge. But if you're not interested at all in typewriter repair, that may not be a thing that you want to try. The way to check for that is to see if when you're typing, any of the keys move the carriage forward. So when you hit a key, it should move the carriage a little bit over. If it doesn't, and if the typewriter, when you're moving it with the carriage return lever or the side lever to move the carriage back and forth, if it doesn't seem to move and have tension in it, that might be an indication that the drawband is broken. You can check that by, especially on portable machines, tipping the machine over and seeing if you see that string there, or moving the carriage all the way over to the side, looking at where that barrel is and seeing if the string is on it and if it's attached to anything. So now I've assessed the typewriter in the store. I've determined that everything on it looks pretty good. Anything that might need fixing I feel capable of, and it seems like a reasonable price. And I bring it home. Now what? Well, the first thing I do, again, is run that diagnostics check at home. It's kind of like when you try on something in the store and it looks one way in the store mirror and then you bring it home and it looks different. I want to make sure that I'm assessing the damage properly on that typewriter. So I run that diagnostics check again. And I want to see if there's anything broken on it or loose that I need to secure before I do the next part of the process, which is air compressoring it. Now, an air compressor takes air and it pressurizes it and feeds it through a tiny hose so that you can use it as kind of a cleaning agent to remove dust particles from your typewriter. I use this on all of my typewriters because anything that gets in a typewriter, dust, dirt, pet hair, sometimes people find objects in their typewriters like mouse bones or rocks. By using an air compressor, you can easily remove those, and dust and dirt is really irritating to a typewriter specifically. It can make it not work as well, so you want to clean those out. I use an air compressor on all of my typewriters. It's one of the first things that I do. You're just trying to get out all those particles to make sure that your machine is working properly and there's nothing irritating the segmentation inside your typewriter. If there's something on your typewriter that seems like it's not coming out with an air compressor, it looks a little gunky, it looks like somebody gooed some stuff up in there, you might want to use some kind of solvent to remove anything else that might be in your typewriter. For this, you want to use mineral spirits. Please do not use things that are slick like WD-40 or some kind of oil to remove products in your typewriter, because those can get stuck on the machinery and that attracts dirt and dust to then gunk up your segmentation. If you remove those things properly using mineral spirits and an air compressor and dry them off, you're not going to have any issues. But if you're just looking to clean, use mineral spirits. Try not to use it on the outsides of your typewriter or on decals. Definitely not on rubber. It is a paint thinner, so it's going to be, removing some of the color from your decals. It could hurt your paint on the outside of your typewriter. But if you're using it on the inside pieces to just kind of clean out stuff, that's a really great way to maybe remove something that could be getting your typewriter stuck. It's also really helpful for cleaning type slugs. I do this for all my typewriters as well. I'll put paper towels underneath the type slugs, which are the things with the letters on them that come up and hit the platen. And then I will take a toothbrush with mineral spirits on it and scrub at those type segments. It removes all of the old ink from those type slugs so that when they type clearly. Toothbrush is great for this because it's got soft bristles, so it's not going to mess up the actual letter. Like if you use something metal to scrub that off of there. I've seen people use Q-tips and toothpicks to pick out the inner parts of like O's and 8s, but I usually just use a toothbrush with mineral spirits. After you apply mineral spirits, you should dry it off. I again use the air compressor to just quick dry those things off of the inside of the typewriter. So that's some internal cleaning. What if the outside of the typewriter has got stuff on it? It's really hard to clean painted surfaces and try not to remove the color on them or ruin the finish, which is why I use my favorite cleaning solution, Simple Green. It is a degreaser and it's made of more natural products. I've never had any issues using it on a typewriter. If you've seen my easy way to clean typewriter keys, I use Simple Green to clean a typewriter, and it basically changed the color of the typewriter because the typewriter was so dirty, it looked like a completely different machine. So I use Simple Green on almost all my typewriters to clean them. You can apply it to a rag and then use that rag to gently scrub the outside of your typewriter. I would again be careful around decals, but I've never had any issues with it. Sometimes when you get a typewriter, a really old typewriter, it might smell because it's old. If that happens, you can actually set the typewriter outside and just air it out. I've set typewriters outside on the back porch overnight, sometimes during a hot day, just to make sure you're getting those smells out of there. Cases can be really bad places for smells to get stuck because they have cloth inserts. So maybe you just need to set the case outside for a couple of days, and that'll help get rid of the smell inside your typewriter case. And that's a common and easy thing to fix on your typewriter. Do not be warded off of a typewriter just because it might smell a little bad. Another common issue on typewriters, and one that people I think are a little bit intimidated by when they first get a typewriter, is the typewriter ribbon. Now the typewriter ribbon is inside your typewriter and it's what inks up those type slugs to actually type on your paper. And a lot of times when you're finding an antique typewriter or a vintage typewriter in the wild, that ribbon might be dried out because it's been sitting out for a while, it's been sitting in a case for a while, it hasn't been used or replaced in a long time. So a lot of times I'll get questions that ask me, where do I get typewriter ribbon? And the easy answer is Amazon. There are actually typewriter ribbon replacements on Amazon that you can buy. There are also typewriter ribbon replacements on Etsy. You can get them in different colors. Charlie Foxtrot has different colored ribbons and he's based in the UK. There are a couple on Etsy like Zen typewriters that have colored ribbons. You can also find these ones that I found at Michael's, and I did a review of them, the Typecast ribbons. These were used on the We Are Memory Keepers typewriters, but they will actually work on vintage typewriters as well, and they come in a whole bunch of different colors. When you purchase a new ribbon, I always suggest that if your typewriter has the original spools, the original little metal pieces that the ribbons wrap around, you should put the new ribbon on those original spools and keep the spools with the machine. The reason we do that is because a lot of new ribbon replacements don't fit the inner mechanisms that hold that spool on there. A lot of times the inner peg is just not the right size. So by rewrapping your ribbon around the original spools, you're actually making sure that it's going to fit into your typewriter the same way it came out. That's a really easy process to do. A little messy, you're going to get ink all over your fingers, but if you're rewrapping that ribbon around that original spool, you're just taking the old one off, hooking in the new one on one side, wrapping it all the way, and then hooking the other side of that ribbon to your other spool, wrapping it a little bit, and then placing it in your typewriter, red side on bottom, black side on top, and now you've got a working ribbon inside your typewriter. For new typewriter ribbons, they might be a little too wet when you first get them because they're brand new ribbons. So I highly suggest if you put a new ribbon on a typewriter, let it sit for a couple days before you try using it. That way it dries out just a little bit and gets that right consistency for typing. So we've got a typewriter for a pretty good price. We've done some minor repair work on it, maybe some cleaning. Now I need to find out what kind of typewriter it is. And what I do is I will look for the brand of the typewriter. So you're looking for, the Royal logo on the front, the Olympia logo on the front, might be on the back of the typewriter. A lot of times they will also have the model name on your typewriter. So for Royal typewriters, the portable ones specifically, that might be on the back part. So you've got Royal on the front and then Aristocrat across the back on the carriage. That tells you the model type. If you're looking for the year of that typewriter, what year was my typewriter made in, you're going to want to find the serial number. The serial number is a bunch of letters and numbers on your typewriter that manufacturers actually use to figure out which number they were in the rotation of typewriters. And there's a great resource on the internet called the Typewriter Database that has cataloged a bunch of these serial numbers and figured out which date they were to let you know when you're checking your serial number what date your typewriter might be from. So you want to identify where your serial number is. A lot of times that's on the carriage part of your typewriter. You can move your carriage one side or the other, and there might be a little plate that tells you a number. Might have a couple letters prefix on it. You can take that number and input that into the typewriter database. On some typewriters, it might be on the bottom of the machine. On both my Olympias, it's on the bottom. So you lift up the bottom of the typewriter and you look for numbers on the base of the machine. In other typewriters, it might be in some other places, but you're looking for some numbers grouped together to find your serial number. Once you go into the typewriter database, you can sort by brand in this top box. So you put Olympia. And then you're going to scroll through down that list, look for ones that might have pictures that visually match your typewriter, and then see the numbers beside those to see which serial numbers are associated with which years on that typewriter. So for example, on this Olympia, I scrolled down until I saw the pictures of the SM7, and then I took the number I had and tried to place it near ones that were similar in that serial number list to find out that this typewriter is from 1963. Sometimes you'll get letters in front of your serial number, and that can denote model type or version. They've changed things between versions, and the serial database also has that information. If you don't know what model your typewriter is, that doesn't matter. As long as you have the make of the typewriter, you can scroll through that list and find typewriters that look the same, and look at the serial numbers around those. Once you know how old your typewriter is, you might be able to figure out how much it's worth. That's another question I get a lot. To me, typewriters are worth what somebody's willing to pay for them. But if you're interested in figuring out what your typewriter might be worth on the open market, there is a Facebook group called What Is My Typewriter Worth?, where you can post pictures of your typewriter and find out how much that typewriter might be worth out there on the market. So we've cleaned the typewriter, we fixed broken things on the typewriter, I know how old it is and it's got a new ribbon. Now it's usable. That typewriter is now something you can use to write pen pal letters, do your homework, write papers, just write in general. A lot of people will sit and write a couple pages at their typewriter every day, and that's a really great way to integrate a typewriter into your life, is just kind of use it on a more common basis. Now for storage. Storage is the next important part for your typewriter. If you are using a portable typewriter, most portables come with a case. If you're in an antique store and your typewriter doesn't have a case and it looks like a smaller portable typewriter, ask them if there's a case with it. If it doesn't have one and it's really expensive, it might not be worth purchasing because you have no way to protect it. And if you're looking for a complete typewriter, now you gotta look for a typewriter case. Bigger typewriters like this one will not have a case, but you can protect them with what's called a dust cover. And I showed you how to make a DIY at home cheap dust cover here on this channel, video linked below. But you can place something over that typewriter, and what it does is it keeps dust from getting out of the internal segmentation of your typewriter, keeping it nice and clean on the inside. In the case of a portable typewriter, that case protects it from getting dust in there. If it has a carriage lock on it, you might want to engage that when it's in the case, just so that that carriage doesn't move back and forth when you're carrying it or storing it. Make sure that you are storing your typewriters not upside down. A lot of typewriters, when listed on OfferUp or Facebook Marketplace, might show the typewriter upside down in the case. You want to attach your typewriter, in most cases, to the bottom part of the case. The bottom part of the case is the thinner part of the case. So on this typewriter, it's the bottom part of the case. When you open the latch, there should be a top lid that looks like it's bigger, and a bottom board. The bottom board for most typewriters is going to have little latches for the feet to hold that typewriter in place. So you set those down on the latches, you engage the latches, and then you can close the lid on top of that typewriter and it completely protects it. If you don't know which side is up, look at the locking mechanism on the front of the case. If it looks like it's upside down, it probably is. So that's just an overview, a little bit of how to get a new typewriter and what to do with it once you get it home. I've run into all kinds of weird repair jobs on typewriters. I've had to replace drawbands. I've had to relink type slugs. I've had to take typewriters apart, clean them, and then put them back together. I recently got a Royal Aristocrat typewriter that had a broken Platen knob on it, and what I had to do was tap the metal piece back into the Platen knob and then glue it with super glue so it would stay together. Those kinds of things are fixes that are doable, that you can do maybe on your third or fourth typewriter. But if you're looking for a new typewriter, these are a couple of ways that you can start your typewriter collection, get your first typewriter, and make sure you're getting one that's going to work for you and is going to last you a really long time. If you're interested in more typewriter content, I referenced a lot of videos here on this YouTube channel. I highly suggest you check some of those out. We also have an Instagram at just.my.typewriter. I want to thank you so much for watching today and remind you, you're just my typewriter.